gentlemen, warmly welcome to our fifth panel discussion of AVI SDG Dialogue. My name is Kim Liang, a junior researcher of Center for Sustainable Development Study of Asian Region Institute. This is my great pleasure to be a moderator for today's program. Our AVI SDG Dialogue today have brought the fifth topic of our webinar series on affordable and clean energy in Cambodia on the floor discussion. And we would acknowledge on what are the progress and the challenge in achieving Goal 7 of SDG, what are the key interventions being implemented to support for affordable and clean energy amid the COVID-19 pandemics, what are the proposed short-term intervention and long-term strategy for supporting clean energy in the post-COVID-19 recovery. What role should multi-stakeholder and public play to support the process? Excellency, honorable speaker, ladies and gentlemen, in this meantime, we are honored to have our permanent leader, researcher in the diverse development field, who will deliver a valuable comment in our program today. Before starting our program, please allow me to introduce our honorable speaker who are waiting on the screen to share their presentation. And first, please allow me to introduce Dr. Joao Ali Luyes, a regional clean energy specialist and coordinator of Asian Development Banks. Dr. Joao worked at the Asian Development Banks as a regional clean energy specialist and coordinator for Greater Mekong regions. He has over 12-year experience in the field of sustainable energy, climate change, and the waste management, having worked with international organizations such as UNFCCC, UNESCAP, and GGGI. Prior to joining ADB, he was the regional technical advisor of the UNSCCC on carbon pricing instrument and market-based mechanism for the Asia-Pacific region. He also worked for several years in the private sector, first as the management consultant with Arthur D. Little, and then later was managing director of the Beijing-based startup company focused in the development and greenhouse gas emission reduction project in China. He holds a PhD in sustainable energy system, a master in energy management, and MSc in engineering and industrial management. And second, please give a warmly welcome to our Honorable Ms. Bridget McIntosh, Country Director of Energy Lab in Cambodia. Ms. Bridget have 20-year experience working as a supporter sustainable energy in Australia, Asian and Pacific. She have diverse experience having worked in business, multilateral startup, government, consulting, and research institute. Most recently, Ms. Bridget is a country director of Energy Lab in Cambodia, an organization established to support the growth of clean energy in Cambodia, with a particular focus on advocacy, innovation, and startup. Prior to that, she worked at the University of Technology, Cambodia Climate Change Office, and World Bank, and the Carbon Bridge Advisory Business. Excellency, Honorable Speaker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. To follow our agenda today, we will be started our captivating program with the first agenda on ADB support for access to affordable and clean energy in Cambodia, which will convey the speech by Dr. Shuao. And the second is Energy Lab support for the clean energy sector in Cambodia. And the speak will be delivered by Miss Bridget. And for the last of our agenda, we will open the floor for joint discussion. Then we will have a group photo section with all our honorable speakers at the end of our program. Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to have any question during the presentation period, please drop your question in the Zoom chat box or our Facebook Live, so our team will collect all the questions to our speaker. So to begin with our program, please allow me to invite our honorable speaker from Asian Development Bank, Dr. Shuao, to deliver his speech. Dr. Shuao, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kim Lang, for the introduction. I hope that I'm audible. I'll just a second. I'll project my presentation. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so I guess that I can start. Good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Asian Vision Institute for inviting ADB to join this dialogue. I also want to greet all participants that are joining us, as well as my fellow panelist, Bridget. So on my presentation, I will provide you an overview of ADB's energy sector projects and activities in Cambodia. And I will also highlight how, with our work, we have been supporting affordable and clean energy in Cambodia. Okay. It's a bit too quick. Okay. So I want to start by providing an introduction to the broader context we have been working on. And I think that this overview of the energy sector in Cambodia is important, especially because we don't have a speaker from the Ministry of Mines and Energy, which would be the most adequate to provide this overview. I will also focus on the electricity sector, which is the sector where we have been working almost exclusively in the last few years. So as you can see in this graph, the demand for electricity has grown quite rapidly in the last decade, expanding almost fourfold between 2010 and 2011 in terms of energy delivered to the end user consumer. So it expanded fourfold between 2010 and 2011 and sixfold in terms of peak demand. There is a bit of a delay when I move the pointer, so I cannot accompany that closely what I'm saying. In any case, the COVID pandemic has slowed the pace of growth in demand, which is still positive. And we expect that from 2022 onwards, the earlier growth rates that we have seen in the last decade can be again observed. Now, this graph shows how this demand for electricity services, green connected, has been met over the years. While 15 years ago, 14 years ago, it was met mostly through fuel oil generation facilities and power imports. In recent years, we have seen a more diversified mix. So as you can see in the right-hand side, in 2020, the major domestic sources were hydropower and coal, with almost 1/3 of the power supplied being met by imports. So as you can see, Cambodia is heavily import dependent with regards to the supply of electricity. This graph that you see here shows the progress on electricity access over the last 15 years. As you may note, the number of households with the electricity connection has progressed remarkably over the last 15 years, from 13% in 2006, 15 years ago, right, to more than 80% as of 2020. So I think that this graph speaks by itself. The progress on this indicator has been quite remarkable in the last few years. There is still a bit of effort required to achieve universal electricity access, but this should not overshadow the achievements of the last few years. The graph that you see here provides us a snapshot, or how should I say, a dimension of one of the themes of this event, which is the affordability of energy. And what we see is that although end user electricity prices are still high in comparison with countries of the region, well, I don't have here the benchmark with other countries, but we know that the prices, end user prices in Cambodia are still relatively high compared with neighboring countries. So despite that, we know that tariffs are unsubsidized and have exhibited downward trends in recent years, as it's clear in this graph. So it is against this background of consistently high demand growth rates, which have slowed down because of the pandemic, the need to rapidly expand power generation sources to cope with this demand, and the relatively high, even though declining end user tariffs, that we need to understand that we need to contextualize the work of ADB in Cambodia in the energy sector. So we have been quite active in Cambodia, especially since 2017. Before that, we were not that active, that had a hiatus of 3-4 years. But since 2017, we have been providing to our government clients a comprehensive package of solutions, which include strategic investments, transaction advisory, as well as policy and planning support. This slide provides an overview of the projects and activities of ADB in Cambodia. I will go through most of these activities during my presentation, but just to summarize and provide you an overview at the outset. On policy and planning, for example, we have been preparing a power development master plan for a 20-year period. And before that, we developed a master plan only focusing on solar PV development. We also have investment projects under implementation. Among these, we have the National Solar Park and grid reinforcement projects. I will elaborate a bit later on both. In preparation and in our pipeline, we have an energy efficiency sector development program and the utility scale battery energy storage program. We have also been providing transaction advisory support to the competitive tenders of phases 1 and 2 of the National Solar Park for 60 and 40 megawatt of capacity, respectively. And we are advising currently the Ministry of Mines and Energy on a waste-to-energy project that is looking for a solution to rehabilitate the Dunkor disposal site. As you can see, all of these activities directly or indirectly support SDG 7, and in particular, the expansion of renewable energy, the improvement of energy efficiency, and the expansion of energy access. I will go a bit more into detail into this, starting with renewables. With regards to renewables, earlier studies, such as the one that you can see on your left-hand side, the one that you see was prepared under the ESMAP project of the World Bank. So earlier studies had recognized that the solar resources of Cambodia are abundant and among the best in the whole region, Southeast Asia. But as recently as 2016, no solar PV capacity grid-connected had been developed. So to support this, ADB carried out a solar master plan, which identified priority zones and a roadmap for development by, for example, taking into account the proximity of the best solar resources to transmission lines, load centers. We also characterized the demand profiles, and we all assessed as well the impacts to the grid associated with higher shares of integrating higher shares of solar power. This study was very important for future developments on solar PV in Cambodia. For instance, this was the basis for selecting a location to host the first national solar park of Cambodia. Which I mentioned before had the capacity to accommodate up to 100 megawatts, and which was developed with the technical and financial assistance of ADB. This project was innovative in quite a few aspects. I just want to highlight three of them. First, because of its financing structure in the form of blended finance, which pulled together traditional instruments in the form of public and private money. Also has included highly concessional loans and a grant from CIF, which is the Climate Investment Funds. So this was one innovative aspect of this project. Another one is that the fact that this project was structured in the form of a public-private partnership. So under this model, and you can see that in the left-hand side. Okay, I can move my pointer a bit better now. So under this model, the public entity, EDC, invests in the solar park facility, providing land, the substation, and the transmission line that connects the park to the national power grid. And then IPPs, the independent power producers, have been invited to submit bids to construct the solar PV plants in separate blocks or phases. I have mentioned earlier there have been two phases, the first for 60 megawatts, the second for 40 megawatts. And with this PPP structure, risks were allocated to the party best suited to manage that risk, which ensured the project bankability. So here you can see in this table how the key risks identified and how they have been split and shared among the parties that participated in the project. In this case, the project company and the public entity. The slides that you see here summarizes another important feature, which, at least in the context of Cambodia, was innovative, and that's the third element I want to highlight. So it summarizes the tender process to allocate the first 60 megawatts of the solar park under the first phase of the project. I won't go into details into this, but well, the auction first of all drew a lot of interest with 26 bids received, with 18 of them being technically compliant. There was a pre-qualification process, which was followed by a technical evaluation, financial evaluation, and the negotiation of the best and final offer. As an outcome of this competitive process, we had the record lowest tariff for a solar project in the whole of ASEAN at 3.877 US dollar cents per kilowatt hour, which is around 1/3 of the average power purchase price of the national utility, EDC. So we hope to achieve similar results under phase 2 of this competitive tender, which was launched in December 2020. We expect in a few weeks to announce the winning bidder. In any case, as you can see, with this project, with the National Solar Park project, we are not only supporting Cambodia, expanding renewable energy capacity, but also in lowering tariffs, and with this supporting the affordability of electricity services. So the solar roadmap in the National Solar Park had, let's say, a catalytic effect with more than 400 megawatts of grid-connected solar PV capacity announced for commissioning by the end of 2022. These were the figures of the solar development pipeline as of early Jan. I think now it's a bit higher. In any case, this is substantial. This is quite substantial given the size of the grid. And as you can see in this slide, the areas identified in the solar roadmap and the master plan match the locations of these projects. And maybe it's not very needed, which is small, but I believe you can get an idea. Now, on the way forward, as Cambodia increases its share of variable renewable energies, VREs, such as solar power, it will need to manage the intermittency of these resources. And in this regard, I think it's important to note the steep decline of battery systems in recent years, to the point that in some jurisdictions, renewable energy and storage systems are already cost competitive with other flexible power plants. You can see that in the graph displayed in this figure. And even these figures, we could not find more updated ones are from 2019. So I believe that the costs have even gone further down than what is presented here. So the first utility scale battery energy storage system in Cambodia will be installed at the Cambodia Solar Park substation. This is will be in the form of a grant, will be a pilot demonstration project. And we also have in our project pipeline the development of a program scheduled to start in 2024 to expand grid-connected solar PV or with the storage systems across different locations in Cambodia, which would build on the experiences of these pilots. So this is a technology that will be very important as Cambodia increases the share of variable renewable energies. Another project of ADB, which is currently under implementation, is the grid reinforcement project. It consists of investments in transmission lines and substations, and it will support the dispatch of electricity to load centers, and it will therefore support energy access goals, not least in the form of enhanced reliability by alleviating congestion in the network, and hopefully also enabling the expansion of the number of connecting points to end users. So this is a large project of approximately $128 million US. Procurement is currently underway. It's a complex procurement given the size of the investments. Another project of ADB that I want to talk about is the preparation of a 20-year power development plan. I mentioned this at the beginning of my presentation. This power development plan, PDP, will consider different electricity demand scenarios, as well as opportunities for cleaner forms of energy. We are currently finalizing one of I would say, the most critical component of this work, which consists of the assessment of a wide range of generation expansion scenarios. And these include, let's say, business as usual trajectory, which would follow past trends. And also options with increasing levels of ambition regarding the shares of renewables, including variable renewable energies, and also energy efficiency. So this work has been ongoing and for quite some time, practically 2 years, but it's approaching an end. We expect to finalize it within the next couple of months. So we hope that the results of this work can be announced by the end of the year. Now, on energy efficiency, and I'm entering the last part of my presentation. Energy efficiency is one of the pillars of SDG 7 and the Sustainable Energy for All initiative. In my view, I believe that it tends to be a bit overlooked in most jurisdictions. It tends to be seen not as the most attractive option on the energy transition and the clean energy pathway, but it's a very important dimension on this clean energy transition. We have been quite active, ADB, in this sector in Cambodia, although more recently. This started at the beginning of last year. ADB initiated a study to assess the market potential and opportunities for demand-side energy efficiency in Cambodia. So we started with a study, which is it's almost completed. We are just finalizing a review process, and it included a detailed market assessment survey. We think it's well, we think no, it was the first of a kind. We collected a lot of data from residences, from commercial buildings, on energy consumption patterns, on the type of appliances that were used. And this is going to mark the end of what we call a pre-feasibility stage. Now, when we started this study at the beginning of last year, we realized in consultations with the government, especially with the Ministry of Mines and Energy and with the Ministry of Economy and Finance, that there was far more interest on energy efficiency than we initially expected in Cambodia. In fact, if you looked into the demand growth in Cambodia, it was not too much of a surprise. But given this interest, we were requested by the Ministry of Mine and Energy to assist in the preparation of Cambodia's national energy efficiency policy. A policy draft has been prepared and is currently undergoing a process of interministerial reviews. So we have drafts in Khmer and in English. The most important one is in Khmer, because this is going to be a policy of the royal government of Cambodia. We expect that this policy can be approved by the end of the year. ADB has also been requested to support the preparation of a generic sub-decree for the introduction of standards and labels to stimulate energy efficiency or high levels of energy efficiency in electrical equipment. And we have also been supporting the preparation of technical regulations, PRACAS, on minimum energy performance standards for refrigerators and air conditioners. These are all under preparation. So to realize the energy efficiency potential in a country is a long journey. And this requires a combination of policies, their compliance and enforcement, and eventually investments on energy efficiency projects. So Cambodia is at the beginning of this journey, and the national energy efficiency policy will be the starting point, and it will establish the umbrella framework for sector-specific policies and regulations on energy efficiency to be developed in the future. And these efforts will need to be complemented with demonstration projects at scale, awareness programs, and capacity building. So the good thing is that the process is now starting, and we hope that it can take a snowballing effect. So it is in this context that ADB is currently scoping out an energy efficiency sector development program. We call it an SDP, sector development program. And under this modality, we have two components that you can see in this graph: a policy component and a project investment component. Under the policy component, we disburse a loan upon government approval of a set of policies and regulations, in this case on energy efficiency. So it's a way of giving credit to the government for putting in place a number of sectoral policies. Then we have a project component where by funding is provided to the implementation of specific projects. In this case, what we have been scoping out are two types of interventions, both involving public sector infrastructure, so retrofits in public buildings, for example, in hospitals, schools, public office buildings, and public street lighting program, which would include the replacement of existing street lights with more efficient ones. And this could also include the greenfield investments for areas not yet covered by streetlights. We're also considering the setup of an energy efficiency revolving fund as a project component. So this is something that is going to be analyzed. UNDP has been conducting a pre-feasibility study on this opportunity. So our work will build on the findings of that study that UNDP is carrying out and finalizing soon. And funding a project of this nature would use a combination of loans, grants, and technical assistance, including financing from ADB, which could be blended with funding from other donor organizations, development agencies that have expressed interest on this. And concessional funding from the Green Climate Fund has also been secured and could be used for this program. Although this, with the remark that this program on of the Green Climate Fund has been approved is contingent on supporting post-COVID-19 recovery. So we believe that energy efficiency is one of the areas that could support that economic recovery. I'm approaching the end of my presentation. So just to finalize, we document a lot of what we do in the form of case studies, sector assessments, reports, even videos. And here are some examples of the knowledge materials that we have been producing over the years, in this case, in recent years. All these materials are available online and for free. I really encourage you to explore them. And just one final point, which is also important, which is to note that most of our activities have a strong capacity building and technical training component. For example, in the preparation of the energy efficiency policy that I have mentioned before, this required the preparation of models to model the effect of energy efficiency interventions. And upon preparation of finalized with our consultants these models, we provided training to staff of the Ministry of Mines and Energy, of EDC, and even of EAC, so that they could understand all assumptions and the rationale for those projections, the logic of the model, and so that they could incorporate any changes that they could consider that they would consider necessary. So we think that these trainings, this ability to hand over technical work to our clients, counterparts in the government is very important, so that this sense of ownership can be built. So this is all from my side. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Over to you, Kim Lang.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chuao, for your nice presentation. And that would be a good start for our discussion section later. And next, I would like to invite our honorable speaker from Energy Lab Cambodia, Ms. Bridget, to convey her remarks. Miss, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kim Liang, and thank you, Joao, for a wonderful presentation. I think Cambodia is very lucky to have the support from ADB. And as you point out, it's so much focused on capacity building because Cambodia has an excellent arrangement of energy within Ministry of Mines and Energy, EDC, EAC, and My apologies. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'd now like to share my screen and explain about Cambodia's opportunity towards reliable and affordable energy access in Cambodia. For my presentation, I would like to summarize the status of energy access in Cambodia and look at the often overlooked use of energy for cooking in Cambodia, then look at electricity supply and affordability, and then what that means for Cambodia's opportunities. So first of all, looking at energy access in Cambodia, as Joao pointed out, Cambodia has made incredible progress in electrifying villages with, I think it's almost 99% of all villages have access to the grid, although that does not mean that all households are connected to the grid. But we do understand that the grid won't reach everyone by 2021. So what are some of the other options? This graph here looks at the red lines are the current electricity network. But for those areas that aren't connected to the grid, analysis supported by 3I, the Australian Investing in Infrastructure Organisation for the Ministry of Mines and Energy, and EDC, looked at cost-effective options for providing electricity to householders that are not connected to the grid and may not be connected to the grid in the medium term. So the first option and the best option is grid extension, but in some cases it's not always viable to do that because a cluster of households are too far away from that grid. And if it's only a small number of households, it's not economically viable for the REE, the Rural Energy Enterprise, to extend that grid. In those cases, microgrids are a very good option. So a microgrid is powered by either diesel gensets or a combination of solar and batteries. For households that are even further away and almost on their own, so they're not clustered together with other houses, a solar home system is a good option, although batteries with solar home systems can prove to be quite a challenge, and so accessibility and reliability of power is quite challenging. I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you a video about microgrids in Cambodia and how it works. I will pull up this video and take this chance to play it. I will just play it for you now.
We cannot hear the sound.
Thank you very much. Now I will just return to the presentation. Thank you. So electricity, having a grid does not always necessarily mean that electricity is reliable. And sorry, let me just move this to the next. Availability of electricity differs between rural and urban areas. So a lot of householders, you can see here in this graph, don't necessarily receive 24/7 electricity supply. So urban areas have over 90%, but in rural areas that drops down to 71% that have more than 22 hours. And 10% of customers have less than 4 hours. Now, this was analysis done by the World Bank in 2018, so it would definitely have improved since then. However, it does give a snapshot about what customers, particularly in rural areas, experience. There's also an aspect around quality of supply, such as voltage issues, where customers in rural areas do face some voltage drop, usually at the end of lines. Now, in terms of cooking for Cambodia, this is an important aspect. And 80% of rural households in Cambodia use wood for cooking, as Zhao pointed out. Now, this has a significant health impact for Cambodians. And SNV, an organization promoting clean cooking in Cambodia, highlights that it is as bad as smoking 10 cigarettes a day for the cook. And usually it involves women and children that are involved with cooking. And there's also a lot of time taken in accessing the wood fuel. And actually cooking is not just about more energy, not just about energy, it covers the range of SDGs for customers. So what are some choices in Cambodia? An Australian organisation has established a pay-as-you-go electric induction cooking system for rural and urban customers. Because cooking with electricity is much cheaper than cooking with gas or even fuel, wood fuel, it does cost more upfront. And so this ATEC has developed a system of pay-as-you-go cooking. ATEC have also developed a biogas project, and I'll take this chance just to share this video of what it's like to cook cook from biogas. I hope that helps you. Sorry, let me just pause that. I hope that helps you understand the options of clean cooking for Cambodia. Now let's take a look at electricity supply in Cambodia, as the electricity supply, where it comes from and its cost impacts Cambodia's ability to provide clean and affordable electricity. So as Joao pointed out, electricity production in Cambodia in 2020 is at the moment produced majority from coal and oil. So 55% of Cambodia's electricity comes from coal and oil. 41% comes from hydropower, and around 3% comes from solar electricity. This information comes from the Electricity Authority of Cambodia, which publishes every year the statistics about Cambodia's electricity system. This is a little outdated, and actually Joao's present image gave a lot more clarity to energy projects in Cambodia. But you can roughly see coal down in Sihanoukville, hydro and imports, and fuel oil, as well as solar power. Now, one of the challenges that Cambodia has in its electricity system is the difference between the wet and the dry season. So Cambodia actually has an oversupply of electricity over here in the wet season. And in the dry season, as we all remember the 2019 shortages, hydropower plays a much smaller role. And so there is quite a shortage in the dry season and oversupply in the wet season. This becomes challenging for Cambodia, particularly with the arrangement of contracting of power projects. So for example, coal power plants like to turn on and stay on, and the power purchase agreements for most of those at the moment require the government to pay even if they don't need the electricity. So you can see in the wet season, it's challenging to buy the output of the coal, but definitely in the dry season, there is a need for it. In terms of new power projects to meet the demand, particularly out of the 2019 shortages, Cambodia approved a significant amount of more coal power, and two of those, in the Hang Seng project in Oudamente and the CIIDG coal project in Sihanoukville, are both under construction. The remaining 3,100 megawatts at this stage, as far as I know, have not received or closed finance. Since the power shortages, a lot of new solar projects have also been approved. And the total amount is 456 megawatts. So there has been amazing progress with solar power, as Joao pointed out, including the incredibly low price that ADB EDC tender produced. But in terms of the order of magnitude between coal and solar, it's very heavily weighted towards more coal power. And there's also been a new hydro project that has been approved. The government has stated that they will not build hydropower on the mainstream Mekong, at least for the next 10 years, primarily because of the social and economic impacts of damming across the Mekong, particularly with the Tonle Sap. In terms of affordability, this is a summary of some of the prices that EDC is paying for electricity from a variety of different projects. Back in 2018, the average price for coal was 8.5 cents per kilowatt hour. The reason it's an average is because Cambodia, the agreement is linked to the international coal price. So when the coal price is high, Cambodia pays more for electricity. When the coal price is low, Cambodia pays less. Currently, global coal prices have gone through the roof. They're currently the highest they've ever been in 15 years. whereas actually a year ago, they were almost the lowest they've ever been in 15 years. So the volatility of coal can actually be quite problematic in terms of pricing. In terms of hydro, it's around 6.9 to 7.9 cents. Cambodia's agreement to import electricity from the coal from Laos was at 7.7 cents a kilowatt hour. And wind power, the Blue Circle company is offering to EDC a price of 6.8 cents per kilowatt hour. It has not yet been finalized, and EDC have not yet agreed to purchase that electricity. And then solar electricity ranges between that EDC ADB competitive tender of 3.8, sorry, that's not correct, 3.877 cents per kilowatt hour to 7.6 cents per kilowatt hour. So what are the factors that are influencing Cambodia's supply options for affordable electricity? So this graph here shows over the last decade the incredible price drops of solar electricity. The main line is the solar is the light yellow, and also here we've also got wind power, both onshore and offshore. In fact, offshore prices are dropping quite significantly, and they are particularly in the region in Vietnam, who is planning to develop more offshore wind. So just to demonstrate that in Cambodia, because this graph is about global prices, here in Cambodia, as you've seen, so the first solar project that was the 10 megawatt project that Zhao talked about, that was the very first grid connected solar project in Cambodia. And I really congratulate EDC and ADB for starting on that journey. That price, the first project was 9.1 cents per kilowatt hour. And as Zhao mentioned, that then catalyzed more projects in Cambodia. So quite a lot of solar projects then came in at 7.6 cents per kilowatt hour, and then that very successful price of 3.877 cents per kilowatt hour. It should be noted that the year that they started planning that 10 megawatt solar project, EDC's average cost to buy electricity for its system was 9.5 cents per kilowatt hour back in 2016. So the factors that are supporting more renewable energy in Cambodia are also projected to play out globally. So back in 2019, the majority of the world's electricity was dominated by coal, gas, and oil, with a small fraction of renewable energy. Because of those price drops, it's by 2050 projected to be 69% renewables and 56% of that to be variable renewable energy. And as Zhao mentioned, the average cost of batteries are declining every year. And Zhao, my graph is the same as yours, 2019. So essentially the global trend is away from fossil fuels. And this has also been driven by global climate action. So this is a timeline of finance partners and investors who have agreed to stop financing coal. I note that the Asian Development Banks in May 21 is a draft proposal, but a number of multilateral development banks and governments have all indicated that they will move away from coal. And last week, China also announced that they would move away from coal. Customers are also driving demand for clean energy. So I'm talking about customers that buy clothes, for example, in Europe, in Australia, in America. They would like the clothes that they buy to be clean and environmentally sustainable. So you've got a number of brands that are based in Cambodia that have renewable energy commitments to their customers that right now they're struggling to meet because of the trends of the electricity sector, which is moving more towards fossil fuels and moving away from where it roughly is around half renewable energy. So this comes a little bit to power planning. So Zhao mentioned the ADB is developing the 2040 power development plan, but also noted that the Japanese Chuguko also had supported a power development plan that was approved in February 2020. And that plan Joao showed as well. But what we have here is a plan to have majority coal and gas, as well as imports from Laos, which is from coal plants. So essentially what that means is that Cambodia is heading towards 25% renewable energy and 75% fossil fuels. And this has been included in Cambodia's climate commitments in the nationally determined contributions. But it's not always been this way. As we know, roughly half of electricity in Cambodia is from renewable energy. But that also changed in 2005. The majority of electricity supplied in Cambodia was actually from fossil fuels. So Cambodia has significantly shifted its electricity system in the future. So with now 95% of international public financing stating that they won't finance coal because China, Korea, and Japan make up 95% of that international public finance, as well as many financial institutions and banks. So what are Cambodia's supply options without new coal to keep affordable supply? So I think it's important just to point out that some of the coal is already built. So Cambodia will already have around 1,500 megawatts of coal by the end of next year or slightly the year after. The 700 megawatts and the 2,400 megawatts in Laos may not be able to get financed. So what does that mean for Cambodia's options? So we would argue that solar energy, both rooftop integrated within systems, and I love this photo. This is a photo of the Ministry of Public Works and Transport solar system, 700 kilowatts. This is a photo of the Schneitek solar farm. And the Blue Circle would love to build an 80 megawatt wind project in Cambodia if they can finalize a power purchase agreement with EDC. That is very clear that solar and wind aren't always available. So Cambodia will have around 1,500 megawatts of coal that will always be available. Hydro is mostly available, a little bit less in the dry season. Solar is available only during the day and certainly not available at nighttime. And wind power is available roughly 50-50 day and night, and roughly 50-50 wet season and dry season. So because those electricity sources are the cheapest, the rest of the electricity system, so the remaining part that would have been built by coal, can actually be built by bringing in the lowest cost sources of electricity, so solar and wind. And when they're not available, battery storage and engine gas or gas-fired engines, or in this case, oil-fired engines, to balance out the system. Now, you would imagine that because energy storage is expensive, still the prices are coming down, but it is a little bit more expensive, and fuel oil or gas engines are a little bit more expensive. You'd think that that would be more expensive than more coal. But the reality is that because solar and wind are so cheap, the balancing from battery storage and the balancing from gas engines only need to run maybe 20% in the wet season and maybe 30% in the dry season. So for sure at night time, but only between sort of when the sun goes down, so say 5 o'clock until 9 o'clock when most people go to bed. Overnight, there's hardly any demand. Some factories operate overnight. So those gas engines are not needed. So they would operate roughly 30% of the time. But the great thing about them is that they're very fast acting. The current consideration for Cambodia is to use gas turbines. Now, gas turbines are like coal turbines. They like to stay on, which means that they want to produce all the time. And what that does is crowd out the opportunity for lower cost, the lowest cost solar and wind to come in. So by building gas engines, the short supply can give a burst of power without needing to run all the time. And that then lowers emissions as well. Okay, Joao mentioned the energy efficiency work that the ADB is doing, and it is absolutely fantastic because the best and best cheapest way of producing electricity is actually not needing it in the first place, what we call a negawatt of energy. And the question then is, can Cambodia power its grid with the rest of the system built out with solar and wind to replace that unbuilt coal? And the answer is yes. And it's not just me saying it. Two different groups have provided analysis to EDC and the Ministry of Mines and Energy about what could happen if more solar and wind could be integrated into the system. And surprisingly, the results of that show that not only can it be reliable, but it actually is a lower cost for EDC. And because it's incremental, you avoid locking in very large projects. Bangladesh has discovered what it's like to lock in large coal projects and then realize that they're not as cheap as they used to be. So in Cambodia's post-COVID economic situation, clean energy can offer an economic stimulus. So replacing the unbuilt coal, the unbuilt, unfinanced coal with solar and wind with balancing will result in local investment, significant billions of dollars of investment in Cambodia, green jobs, improved energy security, improved balance of trade with less imports of fuel and electricity, and it's cleaner. Just to summarize that there are many different organizations that are supporting the government in Cambodia towards more clean energy. And there are also many companies operating in Cambodia. So in conclusion, the global trend is towards renewable energy to provide affordable electricity for the country. The current plans at the moment are towards having 3/4 fossil fuels for Cambodia, which is the opposite direction to the global trend. Global actions are influencing those plans, and clean energy is Cambodia's best option for a better economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Britton, for your insightful and valuable remarks. And Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have been enjoying listening to our insightful comments from our honorable speaker. So our program now approaching to open for the floor discussion. And by the time limit, so, there's some question in our Zoom. The first question was from Naren. He asked about how do you do to elaborate two back-to-back even with the developed donor and stakeholder for a long-term operation positive? And this question is to Dr. Joao.
Okay, I can respond to that question. So this relates to the last slide of my presentation when I mentioned about knowledge products and events of ADB related to the energy sector in Cambodia. There was one that I did not elaborate upon, which is the plan of ADB to host an energy forum in Cambodia. So this was and is still an idea and an event that we have in our pipeline. Our initial goal was to hold these events in May, June of last year, but the COVID-19 pandemic made us continuously postpone carrying out this event. And the way we had structured it at the time was that we'd have one day for, I don't remember now if it was for one day or full day, to have a discussion on the future power system of Cambodia. So it would be, let's say, a power forum. This would be day one. And the second day would consist of South-South dialogue on renewable power procurement that would draw on the experiences of Cambodia in the first phase of the National Solar Park. So these were the ideas of, for this event. And let's say the concept of a back-to-back event. So in fact, this means that it would be in 2 days. I hope this has responded to the question of the participant.
Thank you so much, sir. And the next question is from Jit. So he mentioned that I used to hear the rural people say that the installation of the renewable energy and the maintenance is costly. And do you have any study to compare the cost with the electricity cost? And Ms. Bridget,
Yeah.
do you have?
Thank you, Kim Liang. I'm very happy to answer that question. And to be honest with you, in rural Cambodia, traditionally electricity from solar has not been very reliable. Batteries, and usually they're car batteries, often don't last very long. And so households, and I think many people in Phnom Penh have family that have experienced this challenge with solar home systems. So yes, it was expensive to replace the batteries, and they weren't actually that reliable, which is why I think EDCs and the Royal Government of Cambodia's move to electrify and supply the country with the electricity grid means that customers no longer need to rely on those car batteries or some of the solar home systems that haven't worked out so well. There are some companies in Cambodia that produce excellent solar home systems, but they are actually quite a lot more expensive, like for example, $650. So a lot of families prefer to go to the local market and buy a solar panel, buy a car battery, and then if they've got some money, they might buy a solar charge controller. And so they kind of do a DIY solar home system, which then does turn out to be expensive and a little bit unreliable. So what I'm talking about is actually electrifying the supply of electricity to Cambodia from large-scale solar farms. And there is an issue that may come up around land, although the calculation and the need for land is not not too onerous for the country. But there is also the option for implementing floating solar on existing hydro reservoirs such as Lower Sesan 2. So if Cambodia powered the grid for solar and wind, it would be cheaper than powering it from coal or fossil fuels. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Chua, do you have any comment on this question?
No, not really. Yeah, the only thing I want to add is when it comes to renewables, typically the costs are with the investment, with the capex. The operation and maintenance, the costs tend to be relatively low. So that's the only thing that I wanted to add. But there are many studies in the literature with information about costs of renewables and for different technologies.
Yes, thank you. And we got another question from Facebook chat. The question is, what are the plans of ADB and the government to provide reliable and affordable clean energy to the remote community? Dr. Tao?
So can you repeat the question? I missed the first point, or the first part.
The question is, what are the plans of ADB and the government to provide reliable and affordable clean energy to the remote community?
Okay, well, I can respond to that question on behalf of ADB, not on behalf of the government. We work very closely with the government, but we're not the government of Cambodia. So our current support, as I have mentioned on my presentation, is in the preparation of a power development plan. So this is a plan that will be owned and that will be implemented by the government. So, and one of the objectives of the government is to achieve, if I'm not mistaken, at least 95% of electricity access in Cambodia. So this is the support we have been providing on that regard. We're not really working ADB on last mile, connections. But other development agencies are doing very good work on this. I mean, one of them is UNDP, is working with the Ministry of Mines and Energy in this regard. So so there is definitely work on that front being carried out. Yeah, that's all from my side.
Thank you so much. And I would like to ask another question. Is solar power plants developed affordable for Cambodia in this meantime? And how will solar impact the price of electricity usage to the user? And I would like to refer this question to Ms. Bridget. Please.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the question. So the question is, how will using solar impact the price of electricity for the end consumer, for the user? So at the moment, EDC has lowered the cost of electricity for both factories as well as for households. But it is becoming quite tough for EDC to lower electricity prices further because there is a cost to buy the electricity. And so by using solar power, which is half the price of coal and more than half the price of gas. So gas turbines is around 11 cents per kilowatt hour. So using solar power will actually lower the total system cost for EDC, which should then mean that they might be able to lower the electricity cost for customers. But I clearly can't say that. Thank you.
Dr. Tao, you have any comment?
I only want to add that, as I have shown in my presentation, and also in Bridget's presentation, we have seen that the costs of solar have gone down dramatically. Even a few days ago, the results of a solar tender in Chile were announced and achieved the lowest procurement price globally for solar PV. So as you can see through these experiences, not only globally but also in Cambodia, is that the price of solar is coming down, and it's clearly above the average purchase costs of the national power utility, EDC. and it's even lower if we compare with the purchase of imports from neighboring countries. So clearly, ultimately, this would be beneficial to Cambodia, and it should reflect in lower end user prices.
Thank you. And maybe it's the last question. And the question is, what are the challenges for Cambodia to develop energy sector toward the clean energy?
Do you mind, Kim Ling, if I take that one, and then I'm sure Zhao would love to follow up. There are challenges that Cambodia is facing and has already faced in electricity supply, which is why it's really important to have a plan and then a strategy to go about implementing that plan. So the Australian government has developed what's called a renewable energy strategy for integrating solar and wind into the grid. Because it's true that my country and most developed countries have relied on coal power, where you just throw the coal in, you turn it on and it just stays on. But as that's now turning out to be expensive, not only financially, but also for the planet and impacting our economies, finding alternative ways to power the grid is really important. So the work that the Ministry of Mines and Energy, EDC and the EAC working group have done to develop that renewable energy strategy it's like a blueprint. There's 20 points of over the next year and few years and decade into how Cambodia can integrate variable renewable energy into the grid. And that planning really needs to start now. Even if Cambodia doesn't want to go fully to 50% renewable energy, it still has plans for solar and wind. So getting going on that plan is really important. Thank you, Kim Liang.
Thank you so much. So Dr. Zhao, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I can further add to what Bridget said. I think that one of the challenges to a higher share of renewables in the future is that, I mean, Bridget mentioned this in her presentation, has to do with the committed generation of fossil fuels for the next few years. We don't know to what extent or whether these committed projects are going to see the light of the day or not. But we know that some of them have achieved financial close, and a few of them are under construction already. So this obviously constrains the development of or a higher penetration of renewable energies in the country. I would enlist this as one of the challenges. I just also want to emphasize at the same time one opportunity that tends to be a bit overlooked when we have this discussion about enhancing the share of renewables, and in this is the potential role of enhanced regional power trade and enhanced connectivity. Because greater regional interconnection can allow for several benefits. For example, better management of the intermittency of renewables by accessing flexible resources in different countries. For example, hydro resources in Laos can meet flexibility and ramping needs in Cambodia or Thailand. And also greater interconnectedness reduces the risk of curtailment because it can provide access to a larger and a more diverse demand profiles in different countries. And can also support resilience of the power systems during extreme weather events and other contingency conditions. So I think that this is an area that seems somewhat overlooked. So it's not that it's a challenge, but it's rather an opportunity for future development. And one last point that I want to make is on this discussion about clean energy, let's not just look into these as increasing shares of renewables, but also about improving energy efficiency. And in this regard, the challenge that we see in Cambodia is that they are just in the beginning of what will be a long journey. It's not just about, as I have mentioned in my presentation, of implementing a project here and there, but also of shifting perceptions, raising the awareness about energy efficiency, identifying business opportunities, and realizing some of them. But we think that Cambodia is on the right track. It's just that it will be, a long journey. So that's all from my side regarding that question.
Thank you so much for your response. And let's see if there are any questions from Facebook Live or Zoom chat. Yes. Please wait a minute. If there are no questions up here, then we can conclude our program. I think there is no question. So we will end our program. Thank you so much, your distinguished speaker, for your valuable comment. And as the time limit, I would like to end our discussion here. And before closing our program, may I invite all the honorable speakers for a group photo session, please. And I will count to 5 and we will take a photo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you so much for your kindly cooperation. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.